Second meeting of the Winchester Planning Board. We are being recorded, and we are being broadcast on WinCam. So if you would not like to be recorded or you would not like to be on WinCam, you can always turn your cameras off. And here he is. Great. And Dieb is here. So we will open the meeting with a roll call vote. John Cortizis.
Here.
Brian Bernalia.
Here.
Nick Rosettos.
Present.
Dieb Jarius. Dieb, are you connected?
Can you folks hear me?
There you go. Yes. Roll call vote. Dieb Jarius.
I am here.
And I am here as well. So we are opening the meeting. Are there any updates? I don't think I have any.
I have
Some
a
updates.
question.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if how the design review is coming along with the regulations, if they've started, and if not, if maybe Taylor can reach out to them and tell them that they need to be working on that.
Yeah, well, we introduced the idea to them, and they were receptive to participating. I can't remember if you were at the meeting where we talked a little bit about this, so we have a good attendance, so I'll give you a bit of an update. We invited them to participate in the design guidelines, and it was well received when it was sort of framed as an editing role, which it is, which is sort of taking a combination of CBD guidelines and what we already have drafted for North Main guidelines and distilling it down to the essential pieces that will be helpful to frame the 3A guidelines, and they were receptive to that. And then at our last meeting, while you were on vacation, we did look briefly at the design guidelines. You were warmly received as the point person for that process with design review, so no one else has sort of really gotten dirty with it. So that will be your sort of task, will be being the planning board liaison to design review for that. So we sort of looked.
I'm really not sure what I can do there. I mean,
Well,
we just need to get them a copy of the guidelines.
Yeah. So we've reviewed what we have for a draft from North Main last week, and we made a couple of comments. Brian made the helpful call out that we have some terms such as, I think it was genuine materials, things like that will have to be fleshed out more clearly. And we did that in preparation for our meeting this evening, where we have Michael Wang joining us a bit later in the evening to launch the North Main effort. So he will be here to be on hand pretty tangentially for 3A. He's mostly focused on North Main. But in the review for North Main, we sort of mentioned some things that we will need design review to be present for. And then honestly, I was out of town last week, and we only had 1 week between the 2 meetings. So I have not composed something, but I think this is probably a good time to send at least a sample section over to them, maybe the one with the genuine materials passage in it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe Taylor, can you send that over to them, whatever we have?
Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think Nick, that your expertise in this area would be helpful in that if you would, what I say is point people on some of these tasks, is that you would be the person who speaks with design review and make sure that they're on track.
I would prefer that Taylor sent it over to them, and I'll consult with them and work on it, but I prefer that he send over the documents.
Oh, I agree with that. The roles, that's all.
I think he was making the comment, Nick, that you would be the person to ask them how they're progressing once we get the documents over, because you'll have the better eye for deciding if they're kind of coming up with what we need or helping sort of digest it for us too.
I mean, I'm not an expert by any means of, but I will, I guess as we start to look at it, I will do my best.
Yeah. Okay, any other updates or questions or comments or anything else? We have, I think, 15 minutes for updates, so we still have 8.
Not an update, but a request because I forgot to send email to you and Taylor. Can we put something on one of our next meetings to start talking about reinvigorating the master plan implementation committee?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So our next meeting, that's a good liaison. Our next meeting is scheduled for July 16th. And let me refresh. Taylor, are you out of town for that one?
This was going to be my update. So I'm unavailable July 3rd tomorrow,
Yep.
July 15th.
Yep.
That's 2 Mondays from now, and
Yep.
July 22nd to 24th.
Okay, so you're here on the 16th, but you're out the 22nd to 24th.
Correct.
Okay, so you're here for that meeting. Brian, are you on who's on vacation for the 16th, or is everyone available for that meeting?
I am gone from the 4th through the 14th, so I'll be back.
Okay, great. So I think that could be a good meeting. We won't have petitions because we're getting them all on the 1st. That could be a good meeting to put that on the agenda.
I just want to make it clear that I'm hoping that I guess Michael Wang or someone will be drafting the design guidelines. I don't have plans to do any drafting of this document.
No, you won't be drafting. You're the connection person. You're not the drafter. And Michael Wang is joining us later this evening. So
Okay.
yes.
But to be clear, Carrie,
Yeah.
follow up to that. The design guidelines for 3A are likely going to flow out of what we're working on, at least in part for North Main Street. So we don't want, I don't know if we want to send too much to the design review before we've sort of done more of what we're doing now. But I'm just a thought.
Right, but if we wait,
Oh,
they're intact.
yeah, I mean, we need to get something in their hands though, so that they can start thinking about it.
Right, we have a draft, and my thought is that at this stage, it would be
Why don't we
helpful
just,
for them to take a
why don't we
look.
just tell them it's an early draft and that we're still working on it, but we'd like them to have a copy so that they can be in the loop from the beginning. I think they would appreciate that.
Yeah, and it'll give them more time. They don't meet as frequently as we do. Okay, so then we have the joint meeting with the select board on the 29th, and we had not scheduled our August meetings, which I think we should probably do now. Do people have a better sense of their August schedules?
I do now. I finally know when my daughter's going to college, so I know when I'm not going to be there.
Okay, helpful. That's good. So since it will be August with lots of North Main to do and not a ton of time before town meeting when you really start counting weeks, I think we should probably revert to an every other. Which will, I mean, it's essentially twice a month anyway, because October would
Yeah.
end up being probably through two, it depends on the rhythm here. So if
Yeah,
we
I think
did,
I think it'd be helpful to get back to every other. I think having the meetings more than that was a bit much. Even though, I mean, I understand why we had to, but I think we want to do every other.
so we've got the 2nd, the 16th. So if we stick to, we've got the select board on the 29th. So do we start the every others on the 6th of August or the 13th? If it's the 6th of August, we're going the 16th and then the joint meeting on Monday, the 29th. And then the following week on Tuesday, the 6th, and then August 20th. Or does it work better for people to do August 13th and then 27th? Okay, I think it's all the same to me.
All the same to me.
Labor Day is, I think, the 2nd, is that right?
Yes.
I will may be out of town on either the 13th or the 27th, but I should be able to join in.
Okay. Taylor, any thoughts on the timing for any of that?
No,
Anything I'm not
nothing that
thinking
would
of?
be. I I can't think of anything. No.
All right, so why don't we do? Why don't we
Diab is
do,
away on either the 13th or the 27th. That would seem to suggest the 6th and the 20th are preferable.
But no, wherever I be, I will be able to, I should be able to meet. So I'm flexible, just letting you know that I may be in another state.
okay, if we do the 6th and the 20th, the 3rd is the day after Labor Day. Is that fine for everyone? Cheryl, is this all, anything in your schedule that affects any of this? Okay. Okay, so let's, I'm looking ahead a little bit here, 6th, 20th, 3rd, 17th, and then we would do. So then we would have 3 meetings in October. The 1st, the 15th, and the 29th, which might be helpful because we'll be getting very close to town meeting, which I think is early November. So let's do the 6th and the 20th. And then just keep going every other, if that works for folks.
Taylor, do we have a date for when motions or articles are due to town hall?
Yes. That will be September
I have it 30th. I have it as the 30th.
September 30th.
I have finalized warrant September 30th, but I don't remember if that was our internal deadline or if that was.
Yeah, so we should probably count on having a hearing
So
sometime.
I have all of the hearings, all the required public stuff. That's all scheduled already. So
So that's what I'm
Okay.
asking about for things that might be related to timing.
Right, it's just a question of when we get our documents together.
What are the dates of September public hearings?
okay, so we have Monday, September 9th, our zoning amendment final review is due. Town council reviews that on September 13th. Planning board votes on that on September 17th. The article is due the 23rd. This is all September.
Okay, so we kind of need to, so the 6th is the right, because then we would meet. So if we do August 6th and then 20th, we would naturally meet on the 3rd. And the amendment would be finalized on the 9th, and then we would vote on it on the 17th. So that's just seems right.
So we're
And-
meeting on the 3rd?
We'll meet on September 3rd. We'll meet on August 6th. August 6th, August 20th, September 3rd, September 17th. And then October 1st, my daughter's birthday, 15th and 29th.
What were those
Speaking
dates in
of-
September again?
The 3rd and the 17th.
Okay.
That's what you have, right? You have us voting on the 17th?
I have you voting on the 17th.
Great.
Speaking of, someone, there was mention of town council, I'd like to put in my plug to see if we can find a little bit of money to have a small review by an independent counsel of the regulations. And I know that I keep bringing it up, but I just wanted to keep it in forefront of mind if we can find that.
Okay, we'll keep it in mind. The funds are tight this year with what we want to try to do. So we want to make sure if that becomes a priority, it's because we have very specific things we need resolved.
Okay,
So a retainer does not make sense.
Right,
but-
no, it doesn't. No, a retainer wouldn't, but I, you know, a per service thing may be affordable. So anyway, just wanted to put
Right,
my
I mean-
plug in for that.
I agree, getting the bylaws right is the priority, but the, we'll keep it in mind.
Great,
Okay.
all right.
We are now 2 minutes past updates. Anything else? So everyone has the meetings locked down. Anything else that we need to?
One last thing, just so that everyone knows, and you don't even need to write this down. I'll send it to you all afterwards. But the meetings, the public meetings for North Main in August, these are all going to be coordinated by myself. So it's not required for planning board members to be there. If you want to be there, great, but you don't have to be.
Mhm.
August 7th, August 14th, August 15th, and August 19th are public meetings for North Main. I coordinate all of them, and I'll send all of you all of these dates afterwards. But
Okay.
just so that you know, while we're talking about it,
7/14, same again?
7, 14, 15, 19.
Okay, great. Any in July?
July 18th.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
August 20 was a planning board meeting, right?
Yep.
August 20 is a
Great.
planning board meeting. Yeah. Okay, great. Anything, any other housekeeping updates, questions? Okay. So we are ready to move on to our ZBA petitions. We have 17 Squire Road and 6 Abbey Road to discuss, and I think we have people here for both of those. Okay, so 17 Squire Road. Who do we have here for?
Everyone here, can you just raise your hand, please? I see you, Mark.
Okay, so 17 Squire Road is looking to demolish an existing home, and it comes before us because, well, it's a non-conforming lot anyway, so some of it we can't do anything about, and because of the grade change, is that right?
That is correct. Yeah. So they don't, the nonconformity is in frontage and in lot width. There's also more than 6% of grade change over 500 square feet. The total grade change is just 5 feet, and a total of 2,800 square feet of fill.
Okay, before we hear from the petitioners, is there anything the board would like to discuss? Or do we want to get an update from the petitioners first? All right, Diab? Or is your hand up from before? Who do we, hold on.
I can't hear you anymore, Diab.
How about now?
Yes,
No.
there we go.
Okay, I was unable to find the setbacks for the new structure. I saw that there were setbacks for the old structure, but I couldn't find any for the new structure. So maybe someone could point that out to me.
I think there's a table. We can
Yeah, I
find-
found one on the next page here. This page, if you go to the left, has structure, has these are for the existing and required, but so this page is for the existing structure, but if you scroll down to the plan for the new structure, there is no, I couldn't see a table for that.
So there's no, so
Closed.
all of the setbacks conform.
Yes, I still like to see them though. I'm
So
surprised
so
they're
you
not
can
on the
see
plan.
them, you can see them in
They're right on there, aren't they?
here.
Those,
So
that's for
if
the,
you,
that's for the existing structure. That's for the existing structure.
I
That's
thought-
the new structure, and I couldn't find any measurements to tell me anything about what the setbacks were.
I thought the table had existing and proposed.
Yeah,
No, it
Page 24 of the packet has a diagram of the proposed house, and you can see the setbacks drawn on the map. Page 24 of the packet. At least in my packet.
Yes.
That
Are
one?
they different? Because what Taylor just scrolled by didn't
Right
have that
there.
column.
Wait, maybe right in there. No.
can we
Yeah, that
ask,
one right there.
since we have the petitioners, can we ask them to clarify which page has the?
Sure.
yeah, please. I
Yeah,
may have just
It's
missed it.
I'm sorry. William here, representing the architects. It is the upper page if you, yep, on screen now, the upper page, if you were to zoom in, there would be dimensions from the lot line. And then there are tables on page left that would give the required. Yep.
Okay, I missed
So,
that. Thank you.
yep,
Thank you.
right there, you'll see front setback and you'll see required and then existing and proposed.
Okay, thank you. My mistake.
You are welcome. No worries.
Any other comments you want to make off the bat, Diab, or just looking for the?
No, I was just looking for those numbers. I find it sometimes difficult to read things off of the drawing, so having the table is very useful.
Yep. Okay, let's get an overview from the petitioner of the, I had a little trouble getting my head around the elevation change, so that's particularly what we're expected to comment on, although I have other comments once we hear an overview here. But go ahead. Whoever,
Yeah, if I could, Madam Chair, I'll just give a very quick introduction. Mark Vaughn, attorney representing the property owner, Morali Bogavali, who I believe is on here as well. He and his wife own this property, reside there now, are looking to be able to build a new home that would be located on this lot, demolish the existing house, build a new house. As you just went through, the proposed new structure would satisfy and comply with all dimensional requirements. It's a little of an odd situation in that the lot technically has non-conforming frontage, was laid out many years ago in a subdivision plan under the prior zoning, complied with then applicable requirements. And like many of the lots in this particular neighborhood, a lot of them do have non-conforming frontage, has more than enough lot area. But under the bylaw and the building commissioner's interpretation of the bylaw, when you are demolishing a home on a lot with a non-conforming element, even if a new house complies with all setbacks, you do need to get a special permit because of the demolition and building it in a new footprint, which this would be. So that's one of the applications that's been submitted. The other is for the grade change, which I think Taylor did a nice job of summarizing. I think we would categorize this or characterize it as a very subtle grade change. Technically, it does trigger the site plan review that we've applied for, but not looking to do any retaining walls or anything like that as part of it. I think that William Adams, who introduced himself with Flavin Architects, I think could speak to any more detail you'd like about the grade change and the nuances there. But happy to answer any questions. Or would you like him to speak to that if that's helpful? Or
that would be helpful to me. I'd
Okay.
like to hear more about the wall and what we're holding back there.
okay, is there a wall?
What's
Sorry,
the
we were
dashed
noting
line?
that we avoided retaining walls
Yeah,
intentionally.
there is no wall, right?
Okay,
Yeah, no
the
walls.
dashed line.
Oh, well, I should note there is a wall. It's a site wall. It doesn't retain any earth. It's solely an aesthetic thing to create a division for basically a flower garden in the front yard.
And how high are you anticipating that to be?
I believe it is 2'6" above grade, so 30 inches.
So the grade change is mostly to sort of level out the front yard, is that? Or this,
Correct. Yeah, essentially, one of the first things we noticed from the client, and client had mentioned to us was that there was ponding in front of their front door on the existing house, and they wanted their new house to be slightly raised. So the existing house has a slope from the street down to their front door. So part of this proposed house would be to slightly raise just the finished grade of that, so we can avoid that problematic drainage and get a proper slope to the side. The other aspect was a component of Vastu is that there would be which is an Indian sort of cosmological aspect to the project, which would be an east-facing entry, so that you can see the entry wraps around to the side of the front of the house to the east. And we wanted to avoid specifically exposing a lot of foundation on that east side for aesthetic reasons, avoiding guardrails or any kind of retaining walls. So we were able to create a gentle slope, which would be very nicely planted, as you can see in our landscape plan. So we thought that it would soften the home, considering these other aspects I had mentioned with raising the house slightly and kind of getting the grading to be proper in the front lawn.
okay, and you're bringing fill in to do this, or this is you're relocating earth from the one site to another part of the site, or you're bringing in fill for this?
I don't know if Nate is here, if he would be able to weigh in at all on the quality of the fill, if it would be the native fill, if you would call it that, or if it would be fresh fill. Nathaniel, are you tuned in? He's from Civil.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Dave Feltz, Fields and Thomas, civil engineer on the project. Obviously, it's kind of construction means and methods. Once they get out there, see the soil, see if it's suitable, use what they can on site, and the rest will have to be filled.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
So these are the homeowners that are doing the work. It's not a developer.
That is correct. It's property owner. It's Mr. and Mrs. Bogavalli who own the property, and they're building this home for themselves. And Dr. Bogavalli is on here, I believe, participating or listening. Yeah.
Great.
Dia?
Yeah, could you say something about the trees which will be removed and which ones are remaining? My ability to distinguish that on this landscaping thing is, I'm not getting that.
Yeah, I could take that one. We are not removing any mature trees, gladly. There's, I think, one sapling size, maybe 1.5 dBH in the front lawn on the side. Must be very young. That would be removed. That's the only plant I can that really comes to mind, other than just a few shrubs. So otherwise, I hope you've seen that we're planning on planting some nice deciduous trees along the entry, as well as some carefully placed screening on east and west, which would be evergreens, mostly screening and stabilizing, if you will, the rock outcropping on the west side, and then screening the entry side from the neighbors with evergreens on the west, or sorry, on the east.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
My only question would be whether, how engineering feels about the water runoff issues, but that's coming up, I'm sure.
Yes, has engineering, do we have a review from engineering on this?
I think I saw,
Pretty,
Yeah, I think we see Matt Schuman, but it's
Yeah.
probably for Abbey Road.
pretty dark here, but yeah, so engineering reviewed it and we did request that they do a test pit to confirm soils before a building permit is issued, but otherwise, based on the information they provided, it seemed okay to us.
Okay. Mark, did you want to make a comment? I see your hand raised.
No, I'm sorry, that was raised from before. If,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
Great, no worries. Anyone else on the board with anything that they would like to raise or ask about? Brian?
So this is more a question, I suppose, for the board than for the petitioners, which is as we look at site plan review for this the structure, the first bullet is minimize unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity as viewed from public places and public ways. If you could scroll down to, if you could scroll down to just sort of the front view of the house. I mean, my question, I guess, is, as the new member, I can only say that so much longer, but I'm keep on saying as long as I can. As the new member, how do we judge, minimize unreasonable departure from the character, material? I just say the character more than and materials more than scale. How do we judge if that's an unreasonable departure from the buildings in the vicinity? So it's more a question for the board than for the petitioners. If anybody can help me with that.
So I don't think that we're able, I don't think we're able to approve or decline based on Taylor or Dia may need to guide me here. I don't think we can approve or decline based on departure from the site, but this is if you drive around that neighborhood, this is significant. This is a significant departure from the character of the area.
It is, and it isn't. There's a house on Thornbury. It's probably 50 something. It's on the odd side, very much in this character. And there's another on this one on Squire also, further down. It's sort of it's something we're seeing a lot of in Lexington. I think
You do
It's
see
an
a few
evolving
modern
sort of-
houses already on Squire. 21 Squire is a modern style. 22 is modern. 23 is modern. This is
21
modern.
21
so
I get
my
Go ahead, sorry.
opinion. Yeah, so one of the things that I've concerned about is making an aesthetic statement, because I think architectural design is something which evolves over time. And so when I think of, is it in the character of the neighborhood, I look at things like setbacks, overall scale. Does it, for instance, is it like, which much larger in massing than the rest of the neighborhood? As you drive down the street, does it sort of fit in terms of, I mean, just essentially setbacks and scale, because, I actually like the modern designs. I don't think it's out of place to introduce new designs into neighborhoods if it's carefully done. And I think this personally, I like this design. I think it's interesting. So that's where I come down in terms of character. Character is one of those terms which has been used for a very long time as a way of maintaining neighborhoods and preventing development. And so it's one of those loaded words which is really hard to come up with a clean definition, which doesn't have a lot of historic baggage. So that's where I come from.
I wonder if we could be educated on the roof. In a place that gets snow, this roof is like so baffling to me. It just, like, I'm with you that this is a point in history, and design will change, and this is startling. The one that went up on Church that is very modern and vertical was startling, and this will just be, us having to sort of like, adopt a new aesthetic. I'm curious about the roof, and I would welcome education about that. And then the other point I would make that I think is within the purview of the planning board, which Diab touched on, is whether or not while you're meeting the letter of the setback laws, if you're keeping the spirit of it on a non-conforming property with a more narrow frontage, something that meets the setbacks can feel more massive. I think you've offset the massing that's larger for this house compared to the last one by creating the beautiful gardens in the front. And there's a lot about this design that I think is lovely, but you are pushing a bigger visual on a narrow opening to the property. So I would make that comment in terms of sort of how we think about changes on non-conforming lots. And will you use the roof that, will there be a roof garden or a roof deck, or is it just sort of solar panels, or what's going on the roof?
Yeah, sure. I can just give a 2 cents there. So the roof is sloped. However, it would be considered a flat roof. In terms of snow, for example, it would stay on the roof largely. And then I think
It's sloped backwards, is that what you mean?
it is. It is, yes. And your other question regarding occupation of the roof? No, it won't be occupied. There aren't any raised decks or patios on the project. Just, well, there's a back deck. I mean, it's at grade. There's nothing occupiable on the roof or the garage or similar.
And if I could speak to the setbacks, we're basically keeping the setbacks very much consistent with the setbacks of the existing home that is on the lot today. If you look at that table again, the front setback existing is 42 feet. We're at 42 feet, 42.1 versus 42.3. The side setback is 23.5 feet. We're going to be at 21.1, and the rear setback is reduced, but still well in excess of what's required. 20 feet is required. There's 105 feet today, and 69 proposed. So, I don't think by any measure are we looking to, build out too much house for the lot. I mean, the lot is 22,000 square feet, well in excess of what the minimum lot area requires. So I think that the house sits very nicely on the lot. My personal viewpoint in terms of its overall size and proportionality.
And I did appreciate that this is not 7,000 square feet, or we're not sort of discussing if we can take the map. I mean,
It's a low house also,
Right.
25,
Mhm.
Yeah,
it's way
it's
under
pretty
on height.
short.
Yeah.
Yeah, our ceilings are certainly conservative by contemporary standards. 9-foot ceilings. So definitely was an attempt to keep in character and also have a relationship to the outcropping and the neighboring house. The neighboring house on the west is frankly towering over us, being up a good deal of feet. And I agree with Mark, thank you. And also I would note that 42 is to the garage, and the primary mass of the building is even set back from that, being at the kind of rear of the garage, if you will.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I eventually fleshed that out when I first looked and thought that whole front border was building. It was more concerning that it occupied so much of your narrowed frontage, but since it looks like it will be beautifully landscaped. Any other comments, concerns from the board? So it sounds like we have some a test pit and some outstanding engineering questions. Is there anything else that the board would like answered or comment on? Anything else we'd like included in an opinion before we vote? Or so we can structure our motion. Okay. I would take a motion on this.
I move that we recommend favorable action.
Is there a
Second.
Okay. And roll call vote, John,
Yes.
Nick,
Hi.
Diab,
Yes,
Brian,
Yeah,
and I am a yes as well. So the petition is recommendation for favorable action passes unanimously. Good luck with the project.
Thank you all very much.
Mhm.
Appreciate your time
Thank
and
you very much.
have a happy 4th of July.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too.
thank you. Who seconded that, if you don't mind my asking?
John.
Okay.
Okay. So on to our second one, which I'm going to confuse it with the other one. I know it's Abbey Road. Is it 6 or 8? 8, sorry.
It's 6.
6. Okay. On to 6 Abbey Road. And I think we have a few people here for that one as well. Any comments, questions, clarifications from the board before we welcome comments from the petitioners? So go ahead.
I have some personal knowledge of this because I was on the board when the
Yep.
subdivision was discussed and approved.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the concerns at the time was to reduce the impact on the neighbors to the rear of these properties. I forget the name of the road, but they
Dana
struck.
Avenue.
I think.
Yeah. And so there was so one of the discussions was to allow the structures to be closer to Abbey Road than normally permitted to reduce the impact to the rear. And that was we all kind of agreed upon that. I believe at the time it wasn't clear that a variance would be needed, but I guess it is in the MOU or whatever the document was that the select board signed with the developers. So the reason for moving the house closer to the road is that's the historical basis for that.
Okay.
The only other thing I can say is that there was considerable regrading of the lots during the subdivision process. There was considerable discussion as to how the regrading during subdivision affected regrading when the houses were constructed. I don't believe we actually, it was a question of who is it who gets to oversee the regrading at which point. So I know there is still some regrading on this one. So there is, I'm sure the neighbors have opinions on whether this grading is appropriate given the regrading during subdivision.
I also see that there's additional stormwater management that needs to be added in addition to what was planned for the subdivision. So I know we need to hear from engineering on this. And I was on Conservation Commission when this was coming through, and there were questions about, sort of stability of the bank with the trees that needed to be removed and runoff with relation to the resource area. So
Yeah. I just one other note, thank you for bringing that up, in that this is a very odd subdivision in that stormwater management for the lots was incorporated into the stormwater management for the roads. And the town has sworn never to do that again, but we are stuck with this subdivision which has it intermingled or commingled. So if the homes are larger than originally thought they would be, they will require additional stormwater offsets. So
I'm just wondering, I've got a question. Dee, I mean, you had mentioned that the front setback was reduced to so that the rear setback would be larger. And I'm just wondering if it's because the houses are so large, and that's the reason why they're looking for a reduced setback. It's my read of this is that that's what's going on, and I'm thinking that they should conform to what the rules are.
Maybe we can have the proponents comment on that. I noticed there were two drawings of a house, one with a setback, normal setback, and the other where they shifted the entire structure forward. So if the structure fits within the required setbacks and they're just asking to move the entire thing forward, then I don't think it's, I mean, that's my take of what they're
Okay,
doing.
is that what's going on then?
Well,
That
let's
that is the case. So yeah, that is the case
Okay.
to my knowledge.
Okay.
Okay, anything else from the board before we hear from the petitioners, so they understand what our
Yeah. Yeah, I have a question regarding the impact going forward on granting a variance for this and what that will mean for, I don't understand what that will mean for future additions, renovations. This will become, I presume, non-conforming and have the avenue of going down special permit routes for additional work in the future. Is there something I'm missing? I just want to understand what, if the ZBA approves a variance, does that now allow this property to do something? I don't understand exactly what will happen, so I'd love to have some sort of understanding of what happens once it becomes a non-conforming property, since it's right now conforming.
Yep, good point. And we have a stone wall of indeterminate height. So are there other concerns we want on here before we hear from the petitioners and let them address some of these, and then we can circle back to the board for.
I just had a question for Diab. I understand that when they laid out the subdivision and the subdivision was approved, that the intention for the town, the agreement was that the houses would have a 20-foot setback instead of 25 feet. And this was to help out the neighbors to the rear. And that this may be a surprise we're having to review this because we thought.
Well, it's the problem is that that was the intent, but there's no way within the zoning to accommodate that without a variance.
Uh-huh.
And it's just a legal thing which did not, I think, come out early enough that we could do something back then. So
Uh-huh.
I'm a little fuzzy. The problem is the planning board did some work, then we had to hand it over to the select board, which was doing a land swap. And so I think things were lost in the communication. So we had always wanted to have that closer to the road, but it seems the only vehicle to do that right now is through a variance, which is a very high bar to overcome.
But this isn't sort of a surprise that they're asking.
It's not a surprise to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You kind of.
So it would seem that it would be beneficial to the rear to have the house moved, as it were. If this did not go through, would the house just be built with a 25-foot setback and have it be closer to the rear?
My understanding is that would be the case. Just
So
as
we're
of note,
not, I mean, we're not talking about whether the house should be larger or smaller. The house is going to be built, and I guess I want to just be clear on that. If that's the case, that if they don't get the variance, they'll build it with the 25-foot setback. It'll be closer to the rear. The only thing we're doing is allowing them to move the whole structure 5 feet forward so that it creates a larger space in the back of the house. Is that an accurate understanding?
That's my understanding, but perhaps we should ask that of the petitioners to make sure.
If there's there's one other comment that we got from a neighbor that I'd like to, well, there are several, and I think she's here, she can raise them herself, but if you could make a comment on whether, I'm looking back towards when we reviewed the neighboring house, what is the height of this one compared to the neighboring house? Is this one as tall or taller than the neighbor? So I think that, are there other issues we want on the table before we hear from the petitioners? Okay, and Jean, is your hand up because you're representing the project? Or are you a neighbor? Jean, I think you're able.
Yeah, can you see me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, yep.
Correct. So what's your first question is about the height
A question is
that-
about the height compared to the neighbor, just because I know this is, I think 6 and 8 came up for us in one of the big questions.
Right. So this is similar in height to the house to the left, which we already built at number 4. And
Okay,
it's actually significantly smaller than the house to the right at number 8.
okay, great. Good. And then any of the other issues you want to take in any order?
I'll just quickly answer about the setbacks that people were
Yep.
talking about. This is the exact same identical house that's either going to be slid forward 5 feet or back 5 feet based upon whether or not the variance is granted. We're not necessarily lobbying one way or another. It's a requirement of that development agreement that we ask for it. So we have no choice but to ask for the variance based upon how the original development agreement was written.
Okay, got it. And then the engineering.
So we expect it to, and we submitted this the same way with the previous 2 houses, and that the first lot, it was not granted. The second lot, it was granted, and mostly in part because the lot shape there was rather unusual. And on the 4th lot, the one to the right of this one, it was granted. And I can't really speak to the details of why that was, but that was granted.
Okay, so if this is not granted, it'll be 5 feet behind the neighbors on either side.
Yes, I guess so, correct.
Oh, it says a hit. DM?
I'm sorry, I missed, Jean, could you tell us who you are? I missed that part.
I'm the owner of the property, but I'm not the builder. Steve Meinhelt of Chieftain that built the other 2, he's the builder. He's not here right now, and I think he might be having some technical difficulties or whatnot. But so I'm going to do the best I can to answer some technical questions that I may or may not be the best to do. But obviously, I'm familiar with the background of all this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so essentially we are weighing in on the 5 feet. Is there anything else that the board wants to discuss?
You're also contemplating, and I'm not sure what role you have in this, but in terms of site plan review, we're also requesting that be done as well, based upon feedback from the other 2 that we went through. We're just sort of going through that process as well to answer any questions pertaining to that.
Okay. And Brian, you have your hand up.
Yes, so I drove by there today. Gina, I have a quick question for you. The house right adjacent, I think it must be number 4, but I don't know that that's the case. Will this house at 6 align with the front of 4 such that neither will appear to be prominent beyond the others? I was trying to get a feeling for, like, I couldn't see a stake in the ground of like where that would be to get a feeling for how it would look adjacent to number 4. Like, is 4 going to be closer to the road, or is 6 going to be closer to the road? Or are they going to be both about the same?
Yeah.
If the variance is approved.
I would have to think that 4 would be a little bit closer to the road because of the way it was built. However, the shape of that lot, the middle is the part that's the closest, and that's whereas the road bends right at that point, which is part of the variance. So in essence, because it bends there, it's not going to probably have the full 5 feet difference because the lot turns and becomes wider on that right side of number 4 versus the left side of number 6. And the left side of number 6 is the closest part of this lot, whereas the house to the left, the closest part is the middle of the house. So I don't think it's going to be a full 5-foot variance where the two meet, if that makes sense.
It does, and I guess the crux of my question was, we're gonna have these two houses next to each other. For lack of a better term, are they gonna look good next to each other? Is one gonna look like it's sticking out and one look like it's set back? Or are they gonna look like they're both appropriate along the road?
I don't think you'll notice because the curve in the road that takes place between the two houses.
Yeah, I did notice the curve, yeah. Thank you.
Diab?
Yeah, Gene, can you say something about the change in slope that you're contemplating?
This house actually has the least change in slope of the three that we worked on. The first two were more challenging than this one. This is the most level lot and in theory the easiest to deal with. The biggest area of change is the driveway, probably cutting into the driveway to create a retaining wall near the front stairs. Beyond that, this does not have the significant number of changes that the others had. It's, in my mind, it's not as, even though there are great, that the driveway, the cutting into the driveway is one significant spot in the front. The right side of the lot is very level. The left side and the back has more change to it.
So, since I'm not familiar with the amount of cut and fill done on the other lots, could you give some examples here of how much the grade is changing and how much fill or cut you would require for this lot?
I guess I'm not the best one to answer that question. I'm not going to give you probably a great answer on that because I was not that close to that aspect of it.
Okay, thank you.
Have you had to discuss this lot with the Conservation Commission?
We haven't yet, no.
Will
I
you? Or
believe it's not within their jurisdiction because of the distance, but
okay.
Is there an existing topo and proposed?
say that again.
Is there an existing topo survey and a proposed?
The existing one would be the one that's for the road development. But however, that road was never fully built out that way. So what's existing on the lot was never sort of built out to the full plan that the road was done because the lots weren't graded to that finished intent of what how the roads plan was made.
Okay, anything else? Let's run through the site plan review bullets. Taylor, I don't know if it's easier for you to pull them up. Zoom just absolutely kills the speed on my computer, but I'm trying to get to them. A lot of this will have been reviewed for previous parcels, so okay, so for example, traffic circulation and access would have been dealt with previous parcels. Anyone have questions or concerns about that? Pedestrian safety and access, emergency vehicle access, that all would have been dealt with in the subdivision process. Diab, do you remember any concerns from previous applications that we should raise here?
No.
Okay, so
Carrie, just to let you know, feel free to go through each one of them, but the only part of that Tom has recommended planning board look at is the change of grade. But feel free to go through.
yeah, I'll
all
just
of them.
name them so that we've named them. We do so we still have our engineering person, right? Do you want to comment on the stormwater drainage process, Matt?
Yeah, so as was noted at kind of the beginning of your conversation, the original subdivision assumed a certain footprint for the house, which was 1,600 square feet. The proposed house is 2,400 square feet, so it is a little bit larger than what was proposed or what was designed as part of the initial subdivision. So the applicant is proposing 2 infiltration systems to infiltrate the entire runoff from the entire roof. So, if you go by the, initial submission, there's an 800 square foot difference there. They exceed 800 by 800 square feet, but they're actually infiltrating the entire roof area. The only, really substantive comment that we had was we did note that some of the retaining walls and the steps in the back do encroach on the drainage easements, as there are already infiltration systems on that lot associated with the road. And our request would be for them to redesign the walls or the grading, just to make sure that they're not encroaching in those easements.
Yeah, I can speak to that too. I know that Steve has they've already made those accommodations that you made as far as that goes. And I will say the two systems that we have here does go above and beyond what's required for that house, as was mentioned earlier when this first started being discussed, is that the houses were originally intended to be tied in to the drainage in the road. As part of going through the process with the first two lots, we had come up with the solution of putting in two systems and putting 100% of our runoff into our own stormwater management and not use the road systems at all, to increase the capacity of what the road can handle and fully take care of what we were generating from the house itself. So we've sort of gone above and beyond with that, and that helps with the road systems capacities because we're not even tying into it. So that's the way that all three of these were built. That's something that was done in going through the process with the first two. I don't believe that's what's done on the fourth one. I think that they do tie in part of the house to the system there, but just because I haven't heard that they did a separate one like we've done.
Okay. Okay, and that sort of rolls in flood mitigation. Anyone else have questions on the engineering piece of it? Okay, screening seems well covered. It's natural landscape anyway. Protection and preservation of natural features, I think. Having been on Conservation Commission for this one, I'm gonna defer comments on that. But I think you're restoring what you can. Signage and exterior lighting, I think you noted that you're putting you're blocking with a wall, is that right?
What specifically?
Protection from other houses, I think you're shielded by headlight glare on neighbors.
Yeah, we're actually installing a fence along the rear of this property on the right side, and the right side actually helps mitigate with the house on the right to us in terms of their headlights.
Okay.
Their driveway directly abuts our house, and there was really nothing over there, so we're putting a fence in over there as well.
And you're doing both a fence and a green wall,
Yes.
and those are not incompatible. The fence will allow space for the green wall.
Yeah, it's not a full green wall. I mean, it seems like there's a lot there, but it's not a full green wall per se.
It's arborvitae, right? So they could be like 30 feet. I mean, they're huge when they are left to go.
Yeah, if they're completely unmaintained, yes, I suppose that's more so. And honestly, part of that was based upon, all of the landscaping here was based upon feedback from the neighbors behind and to the right.
Okay. And then everything seems like it's screened, and we talked about consistency and character of the surrounding buildings. Is there anything else from the site plan review process that the board would like to raise? And then we're gonna get comments from neighbors, and then we'll vote. Anything else that the board wants to bring up?
The only thing I would say is that I'm not comfortable saying that this minimizes cut and fill because we don't have any numbers.
Right. Okay, are there neighbors, abutters, anyone who would like to make a comment on this project? Sorry, I lost my hands. We have a couple of hands and Taylor, is your computer faster than mine? Can you see who they are?
I'll manage it as long as you want me to unmute them
Great, go for it.
and go ahead. You can unmute.
Hi, I'm Ann. I just wanted to give a little bit of context and history to the variance issue. The strip originally purported to be used for some development here that what eventually became Abbey Road was very narrow. And in order to make it usable for any kind of development, they had to do a land swap they had to get some land to make it wider. So part of the reason why a variance is required is because each of the lots on Abbey Road are really not deep enough to accommodate even some of the smaller houses that were there before, with enough space that needed to be there. Now, some of the things that I think that you can use to qualify whether or not a variance should be granted are the shape of the lot, the slope of the lot, the soil characteristics, and the shape of the lot was always too thin. And the slope of the lot was always on an extremely steeply sloped area. Now, before the current owners of this lot got their lot, there was a lot of change to this lot. This lot used to be steeply sloped. Now it's no longer steeply sloped. So that still is actually very difficult to develop, and you can see there are many retaining walls proposed. All the retaining walls are less than 3.5 feet, but there are many of them. And for example, there's a 7.5-foot difference between the driveway and the front door, which is an extensive. That's a lot, right? That's almost a story. So there is still a lot of grade change going on this lot, and I think it was very difficult to design something that would work here. I will say that if a variance is granted, and again, I think there's reasons to grant it, the shape of the lot, the significant slope of the lot. There also used to be ledge on the lot. There still may be. In the back, the picture that you're showing now is one of the site plans. There are actually 4 of them that were submitted. A different one shows that there is enough room to have that back green wall if the variance is granted. And that's really important because that green wall is very important to the neighbors. So I would very much like to say that I hope that you will grant that variance. With regard to the site plan review and just in general, I want to thank the developers for going about the proposal for this project in the correct way. They did meet the neighbors. The neighbors are generally satisfied. When I looked at it, it's very late in the game, but I will say that I have some questions, like I do with almost every single house that's being proposed. This is not unique to Abbey Road. People are coming up with very strange ways to measure the number of stories and the square footage. Here, I do not believe that this house is 5,000 square feet. It doesn't matter. We're still going through a site plan review. The only thing I would ask is, let's talk perhaps about the size of the house. That's all, but we're going through the site plan review. So it's not really an issue. The number of stories of the house might still be an issue because there's a walkout and you kind of wonder if, well, there's a lot of usable space in the lower story. But here, what they've done to minimize the impact of that walkout is they've put a green screen at the west of the house. So if you are looking at this house, so I believe that in this case, the number of stories, if you want to look at it very technically, perhaps it doesn't meet the technicality of the bylaw. But if we are able to sustain this landscaping, if we're able to get the variance and sustain this proposed landscaping, then I think that this is a design that would work for the neighbors. And that's saying a lot. If you know what we went through with the other 2 houses, that's saying a lot. That much said, I have a problem with the landscaping if we don't get the variance. And I also have a lot of problem with the landscaping regarding its position over and too close to infiltration systems. I do not believe that this is an issue that has been addressed by engineering. And I think that there is room here for the landscaper, the developer, and the engineer to work out my concerns. I expressed those concerns today in a very late email, which there's no possible way anybody could have read. But it basically is that these arborvitae, the green wall at the left of this property, very important to neighbors that are downhill. This is right over an existing infiltration system. And arborvitae are shallow, rooted, but there's not really enough space there. There are two maple on the well, it's on the lower right side of the corner here. The two maple trees depicted are again on top of or really, really close to an existing infiltration system. The problem there is that, you know what, Abbey Road has a whole bunch of maples located too close to infiltration system. So I'm hard pressed to say that you can't have these two when they exist almost in every other lot on Abbey Road. In the back of the lot, there are, on the top right corner, there are two very beautiful cherry trees proposed. I hope that we can keep them. But they are proposed way too close to an proposed infiltration system that is not shown on this screen. And in fact, in order to see how close they are, you have to kind of look on two sheets at the same time. It's difficult to do. I have some text in the email that I wrote regarding cherry trees in general. Perhaps this is something that we can work out in some future review. But that's really my only comments about this. Again, I really want to thank the developers for their in-depth consultations, which, you know what, even without talking to any neighbors, I could tell that they had talked to them and had revised this project with them and according to some of the projects that we've already done on this. So thank you very much, Mr. Freddie, for that.
Thank you. And many of us are always fans of your scrutiny, but can you state your name and address for the record?
Oh, sorry, Ann Sarah, and I'm at 5 Andrea Circle.
Thank you so much for your comments, Anne. Are there any other neighbors that want to make a comment about this project? And Jean, is your hand up from before? Or do you have fresh information for us?
It's just been up the whole time. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Okay, anything else on this project? We do have Michael Wang waiting, and I want to move us to a vote here. Anything else that we bring up? Yep, who's?
Carrie,
Yep.
a quick question for Taylor. Going back to my question before, what's the impact of providing a variance as far as future work on this house? Is it somehow marked in the records that it was a variance? I'm presumably a future owner could build back further now because they would have the ability to do that because they have the space certainly now. They can go back 5 feet than they could before. But also as far as getting special permits now for anything, as opposed to if they hadn't done this, got a variance, needing a variance. I'm just curious what the impact is moving forward for 20 years down the road on this because it gets a variance.
Once a lot is non-conforming, it's always a non-conforming lot. So just like we have to review any sort of lots, like let's take the Squire Road one we just had, that's a forever non-conforming lot. Every time that they want to do something, they have to come back and do the same process. So nothing that we decide means that anything in the future will or won't happen. They will have to go through the same process again for any new addition or any change.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything else from the board? Okay, so I think we need to, I think we will need a motion to, on the variance and a motion on the site plan. Is that right?
I would like to offer a motion on the variance
Great.
and recommend favorable action because it comports with the discussion at the time the subdivision was created in order to provide relief to the neighbors in the back.
Thank you, Deb. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, John. Roll call vote. John,
yes.
Brian,
Yeah,
Dieb,
Yes,
who did I miss? Nick?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well, so the variance passes unanimously. And then do we need a motion for the site plan review?
I would move that we take no action on the site plan review because we don't have sufficient information to understand whether cut and fill was minimized on the property.
Thank you, Diab. Is there a second for Diab's motion to take no action on the site plan review?
Can I, before we go there, Steve is now on here. He might be able to answer more questions regarding that.
We're mid-motion.
Alright.
Can we get us,
I would second that. I mean, I don't think we have to.
but then can we have people comment during the board review of the motion during the discussion, or do we?
Well, I just want to point out that we are an advisory board and it's the ZBA which truly needs to know those numbers.
Okay. Okay, so we have a
Right.
second
I
for the
think we
motion
have-
to take
yeah.
no action on the site plan review. Is there discussion from the board on this topic? Okay, roll call vote. Brian,
Um, I'm gonna abstain.
John,
Well, excuse me, I missed that. What was we're
the
taking
motion
no
is to
action?
take, yeah, the motion is to take no action on the site plan review for.
I'm a
6
yes.
You're a yes.
Yeah.
Nick,
Yes.
Diab,
Yes,
and I'm a yes as well. So the motion passes with 4 yeas and 1 abstention. Okay. Thank you to everyone who came out for Abbey Road.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are finally able to. Would be for the subdivisions that have sort of multiple parcels, it'd be good if we attached a write-up about that history to the petition if the next one comes up and the board's turned over or something. That's just me thinking out loud, but I think we are ready to move on to our 7:45. Michael, I'm very sorry that we are over half an hour late. But we have Michael Wang from Foreman Place here to help recap the work that's been completed on the project and kick off the final stages of North Main. Is he?
Yep, thank you, Carrie. I'm here and nice to see everyone. And Brian and John, nice to meet you. We've been at this now for about 2 years, and we've had a few stops and starts and side steps because of the MBTA Communities initiative and other things. But I thought I would share my screen and just kind of go through a few agenda items if that works. Check here. Bear with me. There we go. Get this going. All right, there we go. What I thought I'd like to do was just talk about just a few slides related to the MBTA Communities zoning initiative that just passed. Just to give context, because it overlaps with the GBD2 section of North Main Street. And then I guess for the benefit of, in particular, John and Brian, I don't know how closely you've been following this over the last couple of years, but I thought I would, rather than give any particular presentation that I've done, which have been numerous, I thought I would pick pieces sort of through time to just give you a little bit of a timeline of how things evolved and how the visioning originated and those kinds of things. It's going to be a little bit repetitive for Nick and Diab and you, Carrie, but I thought that would be helpful. And then we can also just look at where we dropped things in January, which was the last community meeting in a series of 3. We did continue on, Taylor and a few of us continued on to begin to write the draft actually of the zoning article. But then it got set aside to focus on the MBTA Communities piece. And then at the end, I have one slide that is basically a schedule, a graphic schedule that I put together based on back and forth with Taylor and the best understanding of all the meetings that need to happen in the next 3 months or so before we have the deadline for the warrant ahead of the fall town meeting. So that's my intent. And Carrie, it's about a half an hour worth of content. If that seems like too much, I can scale it back, and I would welcome
I think it's great.
interruptions.
You're it. You're the headliner now. So
Okay, okay, all right. Well, I welcome interruptions. You know, and people telling me I need to expedite things, but anyway, we'll just carry on. So just a few images from the town meeting presentation, if that's okay, on the MBTA piece, because again, setting the stage for the North Main. I mean, I think what's interesting is a lot of the kind of the way it was presented and the goals, you know, have some are complementary to what I think we are trying to do with the North Main initiative, which is essentially rethinking the underlying zoning for the GBD2 and GBD3 portions of the corridor, whereas the MBTA is an overlay zone that would still obviously still be relevant there. But the goals of diversifying the housing and thinking about solving for this missing middle, which is we have some images to sort of clarify what that's all about, and then the targeting of a certain demographic, empty nesters and young adults, et cetera, in this location where it's a very different opportunity for a walkable community close to the CBD, close to the station, and so a different type of housing. Let me just shrink through all because you're blocking my screen here. So again, the MBTA zoning required a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre. And there were some graphics that were included, and we've seen, I have other variations on these, which I thought were, you know, very helpful for stakeholders to understand, you know, what 15 units per acre looks like on different size lots. You know, interestingly, the right version there, the quarter acre with 3 units, is really 12 units per acre, but it's in the ballpark. So, but you know, you can see the variations in open space that happen with different size lots and different allowable heights. So in the image on the right, obviously with 3 acres and allowing a 6-story building results in a tremendous amount of open space. And we'll continue to look at the interplay between height, open space, and floor area ratio, and those things as we think about where we got to with the draft of the zoning to date. So again, here we're looking at the underlying zoning component and the desire to incentivize ground floor commercial uses, which is not something that could be mandated in the MBTA overlay. So that's where having certain zoning criteria for the overlay and then doing something different for the underlying is where there's going to be the opportunity to create those incentives to get the type of mixed-use development that would be ideal, I think, along the corridor. Hopefully people will agree. And then just one comment on the mapping here. This is the new zoning map as of March on the left, with the MBTA included in here, and you'll see the MOD3 is the area that corresponds essentially to the GBD2, with the exception of Molino Park here, which is in the SCI. And so when we look at the criteria that ended up being accepted for the MOD3, we're really looking at that south of Swanton section down to Skillings, and it does not really engage the GBD3, which is the orange to the top of the left map. So again, just a couple more slides to get our heads back into all the variables here, because I know it took me a day or two, having not looked at this for 6 months, really, to get my head back into it. But so the MOD3 is highlighted there in yellow, and you can see the floor area ratio of 1, the maximum height of 45 feet and 3 stories. And then next to that, in red text on the far right of the screen, is the GBD2 underlying zoning criteria. So you can see that they pretty much align. And that, I think, is a good thing because when we go to rewrite the GBD2, we now can offer some incentives, perhaps additional height, thinking about parking ratios, those types of things, and a more floor area ratio, and we'll see how that impacts the potential development opportunities. And then I just dropped in here the off-street parking, just so a reminder on that. This is the one place where the MOD really did make a change from the existing underlying GBD2, which the GBD2 has 2 spaces per dwelling unit. We had been talking a lot over the last year or two about reducing that. It makes sense in the TOD context within that half-mile radius of the train station to go to much lower parking ratios. In fact, many communities, Newton, Arlington, others are really embracing the idea of zero minimum, which doesn't mean that that's what's going to get developed, but that means that is really applicable for this type of housing in this type of context, a walkable context. So that's a little background there. That 0.75 that is in the MOD3, it corresponds with the ratios for residential in the CBD. So that makes sense to me. We've often talked about that southern part of the North Main corridor as being kind of an extension of the CBD, and again, within that half-mile radius. So just a couple images. You've seen these so many times, so I don't want to go spend too much, but I just think it's always important to put things back in the larger context. The 2030 master plan, interestingly, highlighted there in yellow, really did highlight both the GBD2 and the GBD3 as these evolving opportunity areas, and thinking about opportunities for contextual infill and really improvement of streetscapes. A little more emphasis, I think, on mixed use on the southern section and the GBD2. The action plan that came with the master plan, talked about the town's need to make zoning changes to allow for higher intensity development. And this included, incentivizing parcel consolidation, allowing for increased building heights, a wider range of uses, and mixed use. And so I think it's always just important to remember that this is what we're doing, is we're essentially following the roadmap of the master plan. And the master plan was then followed up on by a study in 2021 by the MAPC, which again sort of underlined those points. It's encouraging investment in general by loosening zoning restrictions to incentivize the vision for this corridor. And there were a number of categories that they had made recommendations on how to begin to think about loosening the regulations to encourage the right kind of development. And those things have all been, I think, incorporated into our studies along the way. Just a couple more sort of introductory things here. This graphic is one that we've looked at before, but it's just to emphasize that when we really got down to it, we did a lot of work at the beginning of this exercise in 2022, looking not only at the parcels, and you'll see a couple of examples of test fits, but we were thinking about the public realm, complete streets, and walkable sidewalks, and all those things as being all part of the equation. When it came to ultimately our zoning and design guidelines exercise, we set aside the complete streets component, obviously because we're dealing with managing the parcels, but the significant goals here the planning board really landed on were more density, especially south of Clark Street, and incentives for ground floor commercial. So those themes will continue to come through as we look at these graphics. And this was just the roadmap that we established, based on implementing the goals from previous studies, thinking about the character of the CBD and extending that. There's a lot of conversation about what's the appropriate amount of density to do, and how does it vary from south of Clark to south of Swanton to north of Swanton. And so this is all sort of distilling down to what are the goals for housing, diversity, density, and community character, and all these components that work towards achieving that. So one quick graphic here on the missing middle, which is essentially everything between single family and the larger multi developments. So you'll see some examples when we did a number of test fits on sites, some existing sites, some consolidated sites, and you can get an idea here of how the density escalates with different typologies of housing, and I think that's important. So a single family style house that might have 4 units in it on a quarter-acre lot actually results in 16 dwelling units per acre, which is more than the MBTA target. And then when you get into the townhouse, whether they're mixed use or just townhouses, you're getting up into the 20 to 25 dwelling units per acre. And it's when you get then further into the apartment style, podium style types of housing typologies that you begin to get into the 30 to 50 and more range. And so those typologies are important to keep in mind when we're thinking about the criteria for the various sections of the corridor. Now I'm just going to shift and just do a super high level quick reminder of some of the test fits we did here. And you can see outlined in yellow here, we did a study in the fall of 2022 looking from the section from Clark to Skillings, and then we did another study in the spring of 23, which looked at everything up to the Woburn line and different qualities of sites and sizes of sites. And we generally found that the larger parcels or the consolidated parcels for the purposes of these test fits yielded the potential for a much higher density. And this is all in the context of trying to figure out what our density goals are. And at that time, the MBTA Communities Initiative started, and we were noting when the first compliance model was run, the CBD came out at about a 44 dwelling units per acre as exists, whereas the GBD2, this lower section here from Swanton to Skillings, only came out from the compliance model as allowing just under 9 dwelling units per acre. So it became really clear that that's kind of a missing opportunity for a much more dense and diverse housing development within the half-mile radius. Well, not all within, but basically the half-mile radius is to Clark, so it's about halfway up there. But so that's how that evolved. We did. This is an example of a number of test fits that we did on various size sites and what their characteristics were. And I'm just going to do a super high level on one of them, which is parcel 4 here, which is on the east side of North Main, just south of Clark Street. And what I want to simply point out here is there are certain criteria that were used for the test fit. And essentially, one of them was going to the 0.75 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which is now what was adopted for this area, actually in the MOD3 bylaw. But what I want to point out is with these 2 building footprints that you see here, red is representing street front retail, and blue is housing lobbies and units, and then the upper floors were always housing. But we had 4 variations here on these exact same footprints. So in other words, if it was a 3-story building that was mixed use, it had some retail on the ground floor and residential above, you were getting 88 units within those 2 footprints combined. And that was resulting, given the site size of 2.5 acres, that was resulting in a density of 34 dwelling units per acre. And it might look something like this rendering on the lower right here. That's a rendering we did for a study down in Hull recently, which is a 3-story mixed-use ground floor commercial and 2 levels. So that gives you an idea of what 34 dwelling units per acre would look like. Now, if you did that same footprint and you got rid of the ground floor retail and just had 3 stories in multifamily, your unit count is going up, your retail has gone down, but your density is now up to 43. And then interestingly, if you add a fourth story to that, and you'll see where we're going here, because in the most recent draft for this underlying zoning that we did in January, you know, to incentivize ground floor retail, we are actually, you know, for this lot, we're looking more in the 4.5 stories, and so we'll get there eventually. But I just to give you this context, if it's a 4-story mixed-use building, again, same footprint, but just an extra story on top, you're getting up to 49 dwelling units per acre. And it might look like this rendering up top here, again, from a Hull study we did with sort of a mansard, Second Empire style, 3 levels of residential over commercial. And again, if it became all 4-story multifamily, which I don't think is so desirable in this context, you would, you know, then trade in some retail for more units, and you'd end up with 57 dwelling units per acre. So you can see you can get quite a range depending on 3 or 4 stories and whether you have a mixed use component to it, you know, just on one site like this. So I'll carry on here. We also looked at a number of the smaller sites to the north, from Swanton to Cross, and you know, a lot of these are very narrow sites, and they are also play an important sort of liner or buffer role with the residential neighborhoods to the west. And so here were 2 examples, again, from that missing middle chart of this is an example of a building in Newton Center that is 4 units in a otherwise what looks like a traditional single family home, and that you know, yields 2.5 stories. You can see 3 of them put on this site. This site here is a little less than an acre, and so that results in about 16 dwelling units per acre for a density. So you're, even with these smaller prototypes, you're still on the smaller sites, you're still getting a pretty good density, but obviously very different from the 50 we were talking about with the more apartment podium style on that previous site. And then here's another example of townhouses, another typology that I think would be very effective in this part of the corridor, because it does offer good street frontage definition along North Main, but they can be set forward on the site, and the scale of them still seems somewhat compatible with the 1 and 2 family homes to the west behind it. And whether or not you have some ground floor retail like this example on the upper right that's from Providence, Rhode Island, or if it's just simply a townhouse like this lower right that's in Newton, you know, you can be getting up into densities at around 25 to 27 dwelling units per acre. So even with these smaller typologies, I think you can effectively get an increase in density. So then with those, you know, test fits behind us and back and forth, initiated a series of community meetings, and this one was in November, where we presented 5 boards and asked people to comment on them and how they felt about ideas about density. And you can see here the continuum, again, from that 16 unit Newton example all the way up to, at the bottom right of this left image, here's an example of the new Trio mixed use development, which is in Newtonville, right next to the commuter rail station there. And you can see this is 4 and 5 stories with residential above ground floor retail, and it results in essentially 50 dwelling units per acre. It has a very vibrant streetscape. So that was sort of the continuum, and we asked people to comment on that, and we also asked them to comment on, you know, what they'd like to see on the ground floor, how they felt about architectural and site design issues, which again is stuff that will be controlled in the design guidelines. We asked them about their thoughts on parking and were they comfortable with lower ratios, and just in general with this 5th board, we were asking them how they felt about should development transition in scale and type when you move from the GBD2 farther away from the CBD up to the Woburn line in GBD3. So in a nutshell, I mean, the comments were, I thought, very helpful, and I think this really helped the ZRAC kind of feel comfortable with honing in on these sub-districts, which I'll explain in a minute. But you know, there were, in general, I thought the comments were indicating that people were comfortable with the going, the 18 to 30 dwelling units per acre, and not everybody was 100% sure about, going up to the 50s to 60s, which is, not uncommon in a transit-oriented development context. And so maybe okay as you are farther south in the corridor. But anyway, that was nice to hear that people were at least comfortable with that. 4 stories seemed okay. People, obviously wanted to make sure that things were stepping down to the neighborhood scale. And there are definitely ways to handle that. I know in the new village center zoning that was done in Newton recently, they have a 4.5 stories allowed in the core areas, but then if you're within 50 feet of a residential zone line, you have to step down to 3.5 stories. So there are things like that that can be incorporated to mitigate those concerns. And then a lot of the other stuff was based on building siting and getting parking behind the buildings, and what people would like to see for facade articulation. Burying the utility lines is a very popular comment. And parking ratios, surprisingly to me, a number of people were interested in entertaining the idea of going as low as 0, but I don't think there were also others that were worried about the impacts of parking on the side streets off of North Main. So I think in the draft that we ended up with in January, we were looking at the 0.75, I think, as a kind of extension of the CBD, at least for the southern part of the corridor. So, okay, so now finishing the sort of recap here on where we were, the ZRAC then kind of took that information and took a stab at creating some sub-districts, not unlike what exists in the CBD today. And you can see with the W1 and E1 districts, which are the closest down to the CBD, they were thinking those were good candidates for that higher density mixed use ground floor retail, which is consistent with those test fits that I was showing you of the larger buildings. This liner, the W2, W3, W4, the liner of these western neighborhoods, as you moved farther to the north, there was a sense that maybe lower density was good there. And then there was a little more sort of in-between vibe on these eastern parcels, where they're thinking medium density and perhaps some mixed use. So certainly the corner of Swanton and the sort of gateway location up here in Cross Street, I think, those are areas where the village center overlay districts had been added in recent years. And so there was a, thought given to having commercial there recently. So anyway, that's sort of how that played out. We did a couple of visualizations of these 2 sites again, looking at the higher density south of Clark here, and then more that neighborhood townhouse wrapper feel on the W3 site here. So that was, building on the test fits again. And then so the next trick was to take those high level feelings about what should be in these sub-districts and to try to assign criteria to them. And so the E1 and W1, you can see here highlighted in purple, and it was felt that, well, if it was just purely a residential type building, we wanted to keep, that's not what we were really looking for. So we would keep that kind of at the, the same level that it is today, and also with what the MOD3 has, which is 3 stories and 45 feet. However, if we could incentivize mixed use, we might allow a 4.5 story building on that site and height up to 65 feet for these sites down here, which aren't as, don't have the adjacencies to the neighborhoods, the single family neighborhoods. And they also have the proximity to the station and the core. So I think that was a really good example of how, if mixed use was chosen, that you could incentivize that by allowing for much more height, which would translate to, and much more, and then a little bit of a bump in the FAR, which would translate to more density. And with those, preliminary charts were done for each of these sub-districts. And again, you can see these western, skinnier sites, 2.5 and 3.5 stories, as opposed to, the 4.5 that were being proposed down at the bottom here. and this is kind of where we left off. And then, the E2, E3 sub-districts were kind of in between those again. These were tweaked a little bit as we did the first draft, and there was some rethinking about whether E1 and W1 should be the same, or should one be more intense than the other. And then we've done a lot of work on design guidelines here and thinking about things that have to do with how a development parcel contributes to the street and the neighborhood, the corridor, all the important aspects of how buildings are sited, how you access and locate parking, how the building fronts on the primary street frontage, and then the details about overall architectural character, facade design, etc. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but just to say that obviously the CBD is a nice, concise document that has all the characteristics of it outlines principles. It talks about open space and circulation, what's the appropriate mix of land uses, and then it gets into the meat of it here with the design guidelines, elements of form, and other details related to architectural qualities. We started to, and then we had some of these at I believe the last ZRAC meeting. We started to produce some graphics, and these are examples of 4 graphics that talk about buildings. And these are a couple of examples of mid-block sites versus a corner site. See, there's a secondary street in this upper right one. And so we talked about how you access these sites and where parking should be provided. You can have it as long as it's behind the front facade and not in the build to zone, which is along the primary street here, and having through connections on the backs of sites and things like that were favorable. And then the point being on this upper right one that if you have access off of a secondary street, that's a preferable way to access parking and to maintain the continuity of the streetscapes on the primary street, and for walkability and safety was clearly preferable. So if you had access on both, you would then not allowed on the primary street. But other aspects here, I'll just really quickly, in addition to the buildings and needing to have a certain amount of frontage definition, there was the idea about having a certain amount of commercial in a mixed use building that had to have frontage on the primary street, at least 50% in this instance that was shown, 57% shown here. But again, you can note, and then one more subtlety here in a larger footprint where you're not having parking on the side. This could be called out as a preferred layout where all the parking is in the rear or under a building and accessed. And that makes a much more well-defined street edge. It also, if you have a certain criteria for retail or commercial on the ground floor, you can see you start to get bigger commercial uses here in order to achieve the 50% of a frontage. So anyway, these are all kinds of things that can be graphically integrated and to illustrate the design guidelines. And I hope that we can continue to push these forward. And then not only with site design, but this can be done with architectural design. And this is an idea about half stories, which in your bylaw is sort of assuming that it's a sloped half story. But a lot of communities are defining half stories. It can also be a full height story, but stepped back at the top floor. So that impacts, how you define what's an appropriate height relative to the number of stories and that kind of thing. So anyway, I think all these graphics can be super helpful, both for site design and architectural design. And I am not going to try to explain this right now, but all it is to say that we, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about this if this is helpful, but just when we were ending this exercise in February, we were trying to understand the impact of FAR and height on how that results in different open space areas on site. And the obvious thing is the more height you allow, the more open space that results, but it also has an impact on how much density you have. So for example, as you increase the FAR, you're increasing the opportunities for density here. And those things are all interrelated. And I think we've double checked our assumptions and in our first draft, and it all seemed to make sense at the time. So I'm going to stop there with this last slide, which is a kind of a graphic representation of July 1st, yesterday, through well, essentially September 23rd, when the warrant article would be due, about 45 days before town meeting. And these are dates that Taylor has given me, and we used to build the proposal around. And you can see here the series of meetings, starting with this one on the upper left that we're doing right now, and another meeting for the planning board, which would be essentially when they would have to vote on the warrant article. And that follows a town council review. There are 2 public hearings here that you see in red that would be arranged in let's see, mid-July and early September. And then there are a series of ZRAC meetings, some stakeholder meetings that can be done virtually or in person. There's a select board meeting that happens at some point here, and then these other planning board are just assumed kind of updates along the way, and we've sort of got 2 a month in there over a 3-month period. And while all that community outreach and discussions are happening at the same time, down below here, we're working on refining these zoning criteria and the design guidelines and generating the text, and hopefully leaving ourselves a couple of weeks here to consolidate that all into a final draft, so it can be reviewed by council, and then you guys have your vote, and all that's all done by September 23rd in theory. So that shows you how many meetings there are in a short period of time. That's all I've got, Carrie, I think.
That's great. That was a fantastic summary. Anyone from the board want to, what is we did a little bit of work kind of reminding ourselves of some of this work and getting ready to kind of re-engage and thinking about moving forward. What is our most sort of effective and best use of time with you, and what's our best sort of next step as a board, not just as a Winchester community?
Well, Taylor, let's look at the schedule. I'm going to put the schedule back up here. It's nice to see everybody's face, but I think the next thing on the calendar, Taylor, you were hoping maybe as early as next week to have a stakeholder meeting, which I assume would be not dissimilar to this content in terms of just reminding everybody where we were. But maybe you can tell a little bit about your thoughts on that. I don't know.
Yeah, so the stakeholder meeting, just to kind of take one micro step back and let the board know about the few different types of meetings here. So we have the planning board meeting. I hope you all understand what that is. We're in one. The stakeholder meeting and ZRAC meeting. So ZRAC, you're familiar with what the ZRAC was for 3A. The way that we're doing the ZRAC for this is actually something that I think we would all like to do. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think a lot of us would like to see how it works long term, having the ZRAC kind of by our side as kind of a community group that helps out the planning board. The one big change is that the representatives of other boards and committees will be removed from the ZRAC and placed on what we're now calling a stakeholder group. So previously we had the chair of the design review, and we had a member from historical on ZRAC. We're going to still continue to receive feedback from them and have meetings with them, as well as other groups and committees who are interested in being part of it, like John Schmier from Housing Partnership. But we're going to split those from the community. So we have those 3 different types of meetings. July 10th is quickly approaching. I'm not sure if we're that's going to count, but hopefully it does. and we'll move on from there. Michael, I don't know if you asked me a question. I kind of went on a tangent there, but
No. Well, I think Carrie, you were asking how does maybe the planning board
Yeah,
participate?
so we just still some questions or some thoughts that we had about the past work that we would like to start, incubating. We had some interesting ideas come up around increasing our affordable housing. We had some thoughts on use tables, those sorts of things. So what's the best way to not inundate you, but to keep the conversations going amongst ourselves? Should we periodically do planning board meetings where we just sort of brain dump on you, or should we create shared documents, or what's your preferred way to interact with us?
Well, I was trying to think of what might be the best way based, we had this draft bylaw, that we started working on, which had everything from uses to
Yeah, we all
criteria.
took a look at that. It was great. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, I think that could be a good way to organize your comments, and if you wanted to somehow consolidate them, and whether it's a track changes or a bullet point thing or whatever, and organize them by those sections, perhaps, I would be happy to either read those or to have a meeting with you guys, and maybe it's this second yellow star, and just you guys have this document completed maybe a few days ahead, and I can look at it, and then we can meet, and you can essentially we can walk through these things together and let people talk about their thoughts on why they would think of a certain aspect. I don't know.
Yeah, a question I think for everyone, including the board and you, is whether a helpful organizational point would be those sub-districts. I hesitate to have us continue too far in our silos of affordable housing and dimensional requirements and design guidelines without coming together, but I more hesitate to try to do all of North Main in one stroke. So I wonder if we organize it around what would be best for E1, what would be best for West 1, and sort of bring all of our ideas into a discussion around sub-districts, or does that feel like...
Well, I think that would be a great place to start, because I mean, this is, oops, excuse me. I lost that there. Because I mean, for example, this is an assumption that these 7 sub-districts are what everyone still feels is the right approach, and maybe some things have changed with after the MBTA communities discussions. So, and this was a ZRAC, framework.
I think it's
but
great. I think it's the best way to be sensitive to the neighbors. In
I'm
each,
sorry?
also, I think it's great. I think it's a great way for us to create zoning that's sensitive to whoever's abutting, whether it's a commercial abutter or whether it's residential.
Yeah. Well, so it's just a question of where to, as far as where we want to start, is what do people feel everybody agrees is a good given? Like if these sub districts are a given and everybody's comfortable with that, that's great. We don't need to throw that out and start over with that. But so yeah, that would be fine to break it down by sub district, Gary. That sounds good.
Board, yeah, what say ye? Anyone dissenters, supporters, anything?
I think that's a great idea. I think that the easier in terms of the zoning, I think talking about the dimensions is easier if we start looking at each of these different districts. So I think the dimensions would flow from those. Things like the inclusionary housing, those are more process oriented. I don't know if there's something that's specific to each of these zones. So I think that's, in a sense, that's sort of maybe phase 2 or 3, just because, it's something it's going to probably be similar everywhere. I don't know where the uses come in. I think there's the uses, I think, are sort of separate from the dimensions. So I don't know if we do those.
I mean, I think once we set dimensions and density expectations and we consider the neighbors, I think the uses follow. So I think
Yeah.
that's why I don't want to silo them, because I think it'll be like, oh, this would be a better place to have something that operates, until whatever time, or something that attracts neighbors or doesn't, so I think higher traffic, lower traffic, those things. So
one thing, Carrie, that I can just interject that was interesting when I was looking back at this was we had spent a lot of time thinking about mixed use versus purely residential. But in thinking, looking back on it, I was like, well, what about purely commercial? Because that's not really what we're going for either. So there's another component to that which we should consider. I mean, this FARs by use gets complicated, but
right. And just to make sure you're in the loop about Dieb's comment that we probably caught, but just to make sure, is one of their kind of great aha moments was that one of the best ways to facilitate increasing our inclusionary housing inventory in town is not necessarily zoning, but process. So if we can sort of allow for a review process that's more specific and streamlined, sort of like, our own in-town pathway to creating affordable housing for developers to do a building more quickly. So we want to make sure that we have that in appropriate areas to encourage
not quite
that increase in
40B,
inventory.
but
Exactly, our own sort
Yeah.
of right.
Yeah. I mean, we have a limit, I think. The number of units that are, the density of units will give us, some number of, if we get 10% or we up to 15%, that'll give us a couple extra. But
Right.
really to move it forward, we just have to make it more streamlined. So I'm just to go back to I think, Carrie, your very practical suggestion is, and we start off looking at the individual sub-districts. We are looking kind of at the dimensions, the FAR, how much open space we want. And so we sort of come up with general framework for that. Then we start looking at uses, and we leave some flexibility in our dimensions in case we think that maybe a use is better in one place or another, and we have to tweak them to allow it. And then I don't want to lose the complete streets aspect. And I know, Michael, you kind of skipped, we got one little picture on the first slide of that. And I know we spent quite a bit of time trying to think about how we wanted the look and feel of this corridor to really to tie it in. And we talked a lot about, what setbacks do to that streetscape and how you step buildings back and all of that. And so I don't want to lose that. I guess that comes down to the design guidelines, but it must also reflect something in the dimensions.
Yes, and I mean, I think the idea of the build to zones and getting a certain amount of required frontage definition, which will go hand in hand with forcing the parking to be on the side or rear. And then, again, emphasizing the mixed use aspect of that. I think all those things are components that will be in the design guidelines. And I mean, things like we could do a required percentage of frontage build out, for example, as a criteria, as opposed to really a design guideline thing. So there are lots of potential sort of secondary variables there beyond the big ones we always start with. So.
And there's one thing that John Cardizas and John Sabir and I had a meeting about inclusionary housing, but John Cardizas brought up a really interesting discussion of what's happening at Assembly Square in terms of how they have created this sort of a neighborhood-like environment. John, can you speak to that? You did a much better job than I could.
Well, everyone's familiar with Assembly Square. It's one development. It used to be an assembly plant for the Ford Motor Company 70 years ago. And they created this very mixed use, the movie theater, shopping, a lot of residential, and a lot of workspace. And what they did that was very clever is the architecture styles are varied. I mean, it looks organic. It looks like so many things we see in older cities and in Boston and New York, where you have this very very varied style, varied finishes. You know, you see things that look like they might have been built in the 60s, you know, things in the 70s or earlier than that. And it has a nice feel. You almost, as you wander around, you almost forget that it's kind of brand new and sort of invented, you know. And all the parking is in the core of the buildings, and those big masses, you know, they're generally parking. You know, they've wrapped uh, residential and commercial space around the parking. It's very interesting. And they've even taken the buildings don't really line up on the sidewalk. They kind of almost look like it's a little messed up, you know, like it would have been if you had one building built, you know, in 1940, and then 30 or 40 years later you built another building. You know, they'd kind of mess it up a little bit. You know, it wouldn't be a nice smooth, you know, it'd be like a foot or 8 inches or something. It's it has it has a nice feel to it. It doesn't feel like a kind of manufactured stuccoed, you know, they just smeared on different finishes.
Yeah, I actually have, John, I actually have the Assembly Square design guidelines. If I could share those if you guys are interested in looking at them, but I use them as a precedent for these design guidelines I wrote for the city of Newton for the Northland and Riverside projects. And you're right, they really are. It's a different approach in that, you know, they identify sort of mid-block conditions versus corner conditions and entry conditions, and it's a nice way of thinking about it. Things that are at the head of a long, you know, vista or view. You know, these elements are thought of as having a role in formulating that urban environment. So, yeah, they're a nice set of guidelines. I'll see if I can send those around.
Great. Okay, do we have a sub-district that makes sense to start with? I imagine they'll get easier as we go because we'll hammer everything out, you know, we'll get our head around how they work. So what seems like the best end of start in? Yes, yeah.
I vote for E1 and W1.
I think that's a smart place to start. We've got a good lead in from the CBD guidelines. They're definitely an opportunity area, and they will bring together a lot of topics. So I think that's a great start. Any dissenters? Anyone in support? Thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay, so our next so you have yellow stars on your timeline chart. Are you planning to attend all of the planning board meetings? Because that could be
Well,
more of us than you can handle. I don't know. That's up to you.
well, I mean, I think I've accounted for, I think, two meetings a month with you
Okay.
guys in
Okay.
my proposal, and I think it'd be a great opportunity to get your feedback if we can organize it ahead of time and then
Yeah.
get at it. That would be great.
Okay, so Taylor, is it possible for us to get so this is sort of like, this is a casual suggestion that's kind of a major pain in the keister, because now we have to take all of our guidelines and create them in sub-districts. So Taylor, how complicated is it to create a shared document where we're discussing, where we're, you know, sort of editing focused on E1 and W1?
I don't know. Let me give it a shot. Putting something together. One thing, so there's actually just two things that we need to be careful of here. One is it is town council let us know that we can use shared documents, and we can all edit within the same document. We cannot talk to each other in the document.
Okay.
So if we're going, yep. So if we're going to be all doing stuff in the same document, that's totally fine. Just don't have a conversation using the editing tool.
Okay.
That's one thing. The other thing is that we need to consider what we want to do with the Stop and Shop property. Stop and Shop property actually isn't a part of the central business district.
Mhm.
So it's actually a part of the GBD1. So
Stop and Shop is staying?
we don't know that.
We still don't know.
So we'll,
What-
in this conversation, we need to decide, or at some point, it doesn't really matter, you know, do we create its own sub-district for Stop and Shop? Or do we put it on on E1? The map that you have up there, Michael, is actually, it's incorrect. So
Okay.
Stop and Shop, the two Stop and Shop parcels are not actually a part of the central business district. They're part of the general business district 1.
So they are so
Right.
different from any of the other GBD ones, except for maybe Bunnell Ford.
Yeah,
been-
so I will admit that I didn't know this until, because I mean, this is our CBD, Michael has our CBD map up and it's a
Yeah.
part of this. So in our CBD documents, our CBD rules and regulations and our CBD bylaws, it's included, but it's actually GBD 1.
Okay.
So doesn't the CBD zoning supersede the previous zoning?
But in our zoning, it's like in the state approved zoning, it is GBD 1. So this I see what you're saying, and maybe it's worth you taking that up with Janine, because Janine seems to be the one who is the authority on this for some reason.
No,
Okay,
Janine,
because it's,
she knows the zoning.
she
Yeah.
does know the zoning. I just that if we have, if the CBD zoning came about after GBD 1 and we have, and it included that parcel, then it should, I mean, the official zoning map is what, okay, so this is something we'll have to review. Yeah, because
Yeah, but so I wanted to bring it up just because we're in this conversation now, but it shouldn't derail us from the rest of the conversation. We should keep that in the back of our minds. We'll pursue it simultaneously, but
And it's possible. I mean, it's such a great opportunity spot. It's possible that it works to our advantage that it's in its own little zoning island. So we should definitely add that to our discussion at the next meeting. And then meanwhile, I think it's probably, I think if we discuss E1 and W1 and we get our heads around that, it may naturally follow whether Stop and Shop is something we want to have different goals for, or whether it makes sense to roll it in and it suits those goals. We may want it taller. We may want it streamlined for affordable housing. We may want it, you know, the movie theater everyone talks about, the rink we've all missed. It's like,
well,
we
I
have all kinds
wonder,
of ideas.
is it actually part of the PUD there?
I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's part of the PUD, then it already falls under one of these more intensively.
Right. I mean, it
Yeah.
should. Yep.
Yeah, so we should, yeah, so offline, I think I'll go and see. I'll work with Taylor and Janine and figure out what's legalities on this one.
Okay.
Certainly is the ultimate gateway site there. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It could be more. I mean, it could be Stop and Shop plus more, but it could be more. Okay, so our goals are E1 and W1, some editing of a shared document by our next meeting, and then a more in-depth discussion about where we are, what questions we have, and what we need to move forward with that sub-district. And the next meeting is the 16th of July.
so do we want to just move our way up and just schedule W2 and W3 for that one? Or I'm sorry, for the one after that?
Maybe this is too many years in town government, but I think we should first see how long that one takes us and then pace everything out. But
Oh, I'm just getting scared of how few weeks we have in front of
we
us,
don't have
so.
many weeks. I'm hoping we can knock a lot out at the next meeting, but I think one test one would be great. And
Okay.
again, I think the later ones will be a little quicker because we'll have hashed out some of this, but I don't want to set us up for failure after the first meeting. Let's decide at the next one how far ahead we go.
What's the meeting after the July 16th meeting?
That'll be August 6th.
Oh, okay. So we have a few.
There's
We have
a-
a we have
there-
a, we
there-
have a week off then in the middle of the summer.
Not really. We have a joint meeting with the select board on the 29th. Sorry, I forgot that one. That's a Monday. And that's
Okay.
in person because they meet in person, right?
What time is that?
I think they also
6 p.m.
Oh, 6 p.m.
How long are those meetings?
So that's going to be a special meeting. So it's going to be a meeting between the planning board and the select board. It's not going to be in a select board meeting. So it's just going to be 1 hour because they need to start their select board meeting at 7.
Okay, so 6 to 7 for us.
Okay, other things, go ahead.
So instead of pulling out, I think Carrie, you were saying we should pull out East 1 and West 1 into its own document or something. I feel like we could just have whatever documents we have existing right now, but just say, don't only focus on East 1 and West 1 so that we don't have to pull stuff out, edit it, and then add it back into a whole document. We could just
Well,
be
but-
working on the one.
Yeah, we're gonna zone by sub-district though.
Yeah.
So we don't want to then edit it as zone 2, then edit it as zone 3. So however, that's why I was asking Taylor, is it easier to do a chapter in what we have now, just a different heading? Do we create a fresh doc? What's the easiest way to not muck up our draft?
Okay, yeah, I just was thinking that we could have the draft material for West 2, 3, 4, East 2 and 3 in the same document and just say, don't look at that now. Look at East 1 and West 1. I just don't want Taylor to have to make work separating it now and then pulling it back together later. But whatever's easiest for him, I agree.
Yeah, I was sort of trusting that he will produce something and have us just access it, but good point. We don't want to reinvent the wheel every time we move sub-districts.
As long as it's always round.
Yep. And then as a reminder, we do have that media bank. So if you're trying to remember what the boundaries or what's existing there now, those are probably the least slick because West 1 winds around a couple of blocks, I think. But we have them if you need to reference what's there.
And we didn't have this image in there. Remember, we were looking for this, so this is good. Hopefully maybe it is in there now. We
With
had
the
lost
sub-districts. Yep.
with the sub-district, so it's good to have this. I actually screenshotted this, but hopefully it's also in there too now.
Yeah.
I think this is in, Michael, isn't this from a presentation?
Yeah, it was, I think it
January
was the
24th?
community- Yeah, the community meeting 3, which was January 24th. That's right.
So hopefully we have that in our document.
Yep.
I meant the map wasn't, that we couldn't find a standalone map without going through the presentation.
Oh, I
think
see.
there
I
was-
apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
No,
just need a
no.
sub-district map.
This is it. Burn it into your retinas.
Great. Okay. Anything else? I don't wanna.
Before I jump, I just wanted to ask Taylor, are you reachable tomorrow or are you on vacation for the 4th tomorrow?
I'm on vacation, but I'm moving around a little bit. So if you want to shoot me a text, I can find a time to hop on the phone.
Okay, yeah, no, I just want to circle back and understand if we're doing something next week or not until the 16th. So
Yep, that's
anyway.
fair. Yep.
All right,
Just
that's-
just give me a heads up when you're available, and then we'll chat.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. So great to see you. Excited to get this.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
yeah,
Finally.
likewise. Fine. Yeah, okay. Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, bye. Have a good 4th.
Thanks, you too. Okay. Okay, I think the only other thing on our agenda is if anyone had any other issues they'd like to bring up. Is there any other issue anyone would like to bring up?
Nope.
No additional business, then I will thank everyone who came. We've got we've got Rich here, we've got John here, always Win, Cam, and Cheryl, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
moved.
Woo! Simultaneous. Roll call, Brian,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Yeb,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and I'm an I as well, so we unanimously adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks to everyone out in TV land. Thank you, WinCam. Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks, Taylor, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Good night, all.
Good night.